Hello everyone, it's Steve Barrett here, the Editorial Director of PR Week. Really delighted to be here with our Communicator of the Year, the CEO of Feeding America, Claire Babineaux-Fontenot. Claire, welcome and thank you for joining us to chat about an extraordinary year, and congratulations on being named our Communicator of the Year.
Wow, thank you so much. I'm really humbled by this. And I know that it's as an ambassador for the work of so many people in this network. So thank you very much.
Yeah, and it's good to see you. I know you're dialing in from home, but you've got the great media backdrop there. So you've been doing lots of communications throughout the year. So like everyone, you've got a little home media center there. So that's good to see. Give us an idea of the scale. I mean, we're almost a year to the day since we all kind of walked out of our offices, or many of us did. Many of us didn't. Many other people didn't have that luxury. But it was an extraordinary year, wasn't it? Tell us about the scale of what it then led to and how Feeding America stepped up to deal with the crisis.
Wow. Well, first, maybe I can take you back to around this time, about a year ago, as we started getting some sense of what was in store. One of the first things that happened was they started closing schools. And when schools close, for instance, people who were in the space that I'm in know that about 20 million kids in this country before the pandemic relied upon free and reduced lunch. So we know there are going to be so many kids out there who are missing meals just by that act. When we went into the shutdown mode, we knew already that the people that we served, even before the pandemic, that they inordinately relied upon the areas of the economy that were being shut down. So restaurant industry, a lot of the people that we serve certainly are frontline workers themselves. So as that started happening, we almost immediately started seeing the impact on the ground. I think what surprised us at first, though, was how many new people were showing up. From the very beginning, there were large numbers of people who had never before relied upon the charitable food system who were starting to come and ask for help. What was really hard to process for so many of us was when it happened many times that people who had in fact been volunteers found themselves on the other side of that line in need of help. So even today, about 40% of the people who are turning to us for help have never before relied upon the charitable food system. Well, we had moments in time when we had increases in demand of over 400%, over 400%. And in some places it happened, it felt like overnight. So yeah. We had this perfect storm of things happening, people who needed to protect themselves, who needed to protect their families, who also wanted to get out and help. We had issues going on. Your audience probably remembers those empty store shelves, for instance. That's part of our perfect storm back then, because one of the most significant places that we receive food that we use in order to provide to the people who come to us for help is retail. Well, if their shelves are empty, that means they're not providing us with any food. So it was a lot of things coming all at once. We started feeling it as there were hot spots in the country. We knew because there were hot spots in those lines asking for help.
Yeah, it was a perfect storm, wasn't it? And on top of that, you've got the coronavirus, and the coronavirus is impacting those communities more than other communities as well. I can guess that people lining up for food or gathering in groups was a health risk. So what sort of new protocols did you have to put in place? And how did you get the messaging out around that?
Yeah. So first, let me say, I know you guys provide, I'll say this one more time, that you at least one more time, that I am an ambassador for what this is. I'm not a person who did this alone, thank heaven, because one of the things that I knew going into this as we started getting a sense of what was ahead was I knew how remarkably dedicated the people who are part of this network are. And they're really innovative. So many of them, they had the same health concerns that everybody else in the public had, but they kept showing up. We didn't shut down. We were out there the whole time. And they're very, very creative. So they're passionate and they're creative. So they started coming up with new ways of distributing food. So as an example, that your audience probably has seen those long lines of people going to get food in their cars. That was so we could have low impact distributions. So people pull up in their cars, we put the food in their trunks, and then that makes it easier from a health perspective for everyone who's involved. But they did things that didn't show up on TV too. They did things like, I talked about kids, and I know so many of us have just a special place in our hearts for children who struggle. So our members are inside of communities. We're a national organization, but we have a reach that cuts across the nation. So these are people who live inside of these communities. So they knew about, for instance, communities where a lot of children qualified for free or reduced lunch, or a lot of families live beneath the poverty line, and they literally would take bus routes, and they sometimes still do that, take bus routes and go, excuse me, and go door to door, bringing food to where people were, because maybe it clicks, but there are some people who are struggling so much that they don't even have access to a car in order to go to where the food was. So we had to come up with effective ways of getting the food to people where they were. So lots of mobile distributions, lots of outreach, lots of innovation, really creative partnerships with companies who signed up and said, you know, maybe we can help you with the last mile. What if we use our cars to go and deliver that food to those doorsteps? So a whole plethora of innovation and creativity. They say that this might be the mother of invention. I think necessity is, and it was.
That's true. There's been so much disruption, but people have been very creative across the board, haven't they? And
They really have.
Just brought in things that you might actually keep after this pandemic's over, because it is the mother of invention. That's a good point. So was it very much an organic messaging thing, or were there some overarching things? Were you using influencers and celebrities to get the message out, or was it more of a grassroots thing, or is it all of the above?
It was all of the above, Steve. It was all of the above. So great news for us is we have some fabulous internal resources who are very thoughtful about how we speak of our mission. We have people who work inside of our organization who are deeply steeped in human-centered design and in how it is that we speak with dignity and respect for the people that we serve, and how we center the people that we serve in our work. So we had those internal resources. And then as people started seeing those lines, we found ways to get in front of the American public as much as we could. Some of our partners, in fact, gave us their airtime so that we could get in front of the public and speak. Jersey Mike's, for instance, I made my debut with Jersey Mike. That was in an actual national television commercial that raised awareness and also raised money. So then once people understood, more and more people started coming and asking us to help. So yes, influencers. My first time ever on Instagram was with Chris Pratt, as he was dedicating his time. That's kind of a big deal. Sometimes I say those things and then I go back and go, did I? Yes, that's it was Chris Pratt. Oprah Winfrey learned about these challenges, and she used her platform to elevate and get the message out. So
if you've got
Oprah on support has been extraordinary.
You're good, aren't you?
What was that, sir?
You've got Oprah on board. You've got good distribution.
We're pretty good. Yes, we're pretty much locked.
You were also there was some awareness raising at the Golden Globes as well.
Yeah. So most recently at the Golden Globes, there was awareness raising there. And again, I think what's happened is something that I talked about it when I first started. I've only been the CEO in this company, in this organization, since October of 2018. But this organization has existed for many, many decades doing this work. But when I joined, and I noticed that before the pandemic, when I joined, there were 37 million people who were food insecure in this country. That's a huge number. And then in 2019, it had gotten down to 35 million. But I'd say, but that's 35 million too many. We can do better than that. Little did I know that in 2020, there were going to be all of these headwinds that could result in over 40 million people being food insecure and taking a step back on food insecurity rates. But one of the things that I strongly believed, and I'm so grateful that the public has proved true, is that part of the reason that we've had so many issues, long-term issues around food insecurity, is because people really just didn't know it was happening.
Yeah, and
yeah.
The scale there is 10% of the population, isn't it? And that's before the pandemic. So yeah, it's definitely something we need to keep front of mind. A lot of our audience is working in business, in corporations, for brands, the agencies that support them. What's your message that goes out to them? I know you've got lots of corporate partnerships and businesses really been stepping up, you know, in recent years and being genuinely purposeful. But what would your message be to businesses and brands?
Well, I think that probably one of my biggest concerns is a part of my answer. So if I have a concern, it is that we will all celebrate, and I know it's coming, that we're gonna make progress with the overall economy. It's gonna happen. Forecasts right now are better than they were before in terms of unemployment rates, and we're gonna have a boom, and I'm so hopeful and confident, in fact, that that's gonna be true. But what's likely to also be true is that vulnerable communities are not going to rebound nearly as quickly as the rest of the economy. So my ask of everyone, including business leaders, is that you not forget them. That those lines, because the pandemic, we're going to get it under control. The lines are going to go inside of buildings, but they're going to still exist. They're going to be people who need help. And when we put everything that we are as a country behind a problem, we can solve it. And this is one that's solvable. So I'd ask for them to continue to think about vulnerable communities, to think about hunger, and to keep coming to the table in ideation about how we solve for it.
Yeah, that's really true. And I hope business does step up and continue being involved, because what you said about kids at schools, you know, PR Week has had partnerships with Gen Youth, you know, feeding food carts, and we did at our conference in Chicago, we donated a food cart, and it was great to see the kids in the morning. You know, that really was a big part of their day, and they can't learn unless they've got some food in their stomach. So it's a really big issue that needs to be still concentrated on. Claire, if there was a story that kind of summed up the year for you, or an anecdote, what would you say? Could you pick one thing out that really sort of summed up what an extraordinary year it was, and also how people stepped up and really gave back?
Well, am I limited to one?
No.
There's so many.
Storytelling. So
there's so many, but let me try to squeeze into. If you don't mind. So one of them that I will never ever forget is I was in Indiana at a food distribution, and it was close to Veterans Day. And there was this lady who was driving an SUV, and she's coming around a corner, and she's in the line to get food. And all of a sudden, something starts coming out of her window, and I don't know what it is, but it catches my attention. And something's like waving out of her window, and it's an American flag. And she's waving it because right in front of her are troops from the National Guard. I don't know if people realize how invaluable the National Guard has been to our efforts over the last year. A significant percentage of our volunteers are over 65. Many of them could not put themselves at risk, nor would we put them at risk to continue to do what they were doing before the pandemic. So that put a big hole for, well, what are we going to do about volunteers when we actually have an increase in need? And the National Guard across the country stepped up for us. And it was so heartfelt that it makes me tear up when I think about it, how grateful she was and how grateful I am and how grateful the nation should be for what the National Guard does. And sometimes we don't see it, but I got to see it that day and I'll never forget it. Another one would relate to this little girl who went to food distribution, and I happen to have a personal affinity for watermelon. Apparently this little girl did too. So her family's getting fresh produce and she wants a watermelon. And the people in our organization are giving out the food and they give a basket and stuff. And the little girl says, no, but she wanted the watermelon. And we went back and forth for a second. And I think the member of our team then thought, well, why don't I just give her her watermelon? She wants her own watermelon. And she took that watermelon and she cradled it almost like a doll. And I thought about in that was so symbolic for me of how powerful that nutritionally dense item is for that child. And that sometimes many of us have the privilege of taking for granted things that other people desperately desire, that in that moment what that child wanted was that watermelon. And I was so proud that I'm a part of an organization that made sure she got it. So those are two examples.
Those are two fantastic, iconic stories. I can see the images in my head while you were telling them. And I guess that's why you're our Communicator of the Year. And we salute you. We salute Feeding America, all the amazing work you do. And there's an opportunity to donate in the captions and during the event. So thank you so much for what you're doing. Thanks for your continued work. And yeah, for all the businesses and brands up there, just remember this isn't over yet. So even after the pandemic, it's still going to be a big problem. So it's something we need to address. But Claire, thank you so much for joining us, and congratulations again on being Communicator of the Year.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.